Hey again, I'm back for webinar number 2. Webinar number 1, we're kind of getting into the why all this matters, and webinar 2 is we're going to get some more practical stuff out there. So let me introduce myself one more time. I'm Brittany Porch from Columbus, Ohio. These days, I've lived here for almost 12 years. And I want to tell you a couple more things about me. One of my favorite things to do is try out different restaurants from different cultures from around the world. I'm a very adventurous eater and a terrible cook. But I also have taken this love of eating into my ministry, and there's rarely anything I'm involved with at church life that doesn't have food. I'm not cooking the food, but I'm very good at procuring food. So the sacrament of the children at our church is goldfish and lemonade. And in the pandemic, I even mailed goldfish and lemonade to their houses. Just being fun. Wanted to give you a little bit more about who I am and what I love to do. I also have another superpower maybe you care about. I'm able to tell middle schoolers they smell bad in a funny enough way that they are not offended. Anyway, I've carried that superpower through the years. But I'm glad you're back again for another webinar. So let's dive right in. I give a trigger warning. So we just did generational theory. I want to let you know younger generations, probably like mid millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha, appreciate trigger warnings. They want emotional safety as much as they want physical safety. So I give this trigger warning. I am going to be talking about the pandemic for a little bit. Anytime I look back at my notes from the pandemic in ministry or in my own life, I feel it right here. I'm like, wow, this is really wild to read. But I went there today. I looked back at some of our early notes because I wanted to pull some of that stuff forward for you all. And one thing we wrote down in the session minutes from March 2020 is a year from now, we want to look back and say we responded to this crisis with flexibility, creativity, and generosity. So I just remember those words being repeated over and over and over, and I just want to bring them for you today. I know we're not in a pandemic and it's not a crisis moment. Probably. I don't think that is. I don't know when you're going to be watching this, but as of right now, I don't feel like we're in a full crisis, but maybe little crisis. Um, and yet these words still resonate super true for, I think, ministry in 2024, 2025, and in the years ahead. The church has shifted. The church has changed. Patterns in parenting and being have changed. Priorities and values have changed. We don't get to control the larger culture, but we live within it. And I think these words will be part of our guiding hope as we continue to remake the church. So they were important in March 2020, and they are important today. The one word I would add, though, is curiosity. I think my little favorite monkey will tell you that, we need this type of wonder. Like, what if? What's going on? Can we? Should we? Why? Like those curious questions, genuine curious, not with your own agenda or anger or frustration, but hmm, I wonder why everyone's doing that, or I wonder why no one came to this. That kind of curiosity, I think, is should be added to our list. So I want to do a little example. So I'm going to have us pick something that became a problem in my context years ago, and use these sort of as the guiding words to rake through that problem. So let's go through our issue. The issue is going to be we have a children's choir that used to be thriving but is no longer. I wonder if some of this sounds familiar to you all. So, what are some of the issues that we faced? Well, we had way less attendance, super small group of kids at that point. By the time we were like, what are we going to do? We also had kids that didn't like to perform. So like were crying the day that they were supposed to sing in front of the church. So not only were we at a really small group of kids, I'm talking 2 to 5. We also, of those 2 to 5, half of them really didn't want to even be there. And so lots of us were using tactics like guilt and shame to get them to sing, and like, because we couldn't do it without them and things like that. And it also had become obvious it wasn't a priority for parents to get their kids to children's choir or to participate in it. So then we get curious, flexible, and creativity. I took out generosity because I really didn't have much for that. But the curiosity piece was, we started asking, are we the only place these children get to sing? Are they getting the opportunities to engage in singing and music and other places and ways? Or is that like our responsibility for the community? Are we holding that piece for the community? We ask questions like, is this good for anxious, shy kids? Is this meeting the needs of the children? Is this something that's like growing their faith in this particular model? Um, then we get to that flexibility. Like, could we do this another way? Does it have to look like this? Or can we be flexible that it looks like that, or that, or that, or not at all? And then for creativity, we, through many groups and conversations with kids and parents and elders and everybody, um, we came up with another idea. Like, we thought, well, let's pause. I like the word pause instead of stop because we don't know, we might pick it up again someday. Pause the children's choir and start singing for fun and joy and teaching the kids the songs of our faith and how to sing the faith in other programming. Let's sing some, like, that could either be in a children's class or that might be in worship. Sing some songs that kids can engage in that are maybe outside the hymnal, or Jesus Loves Me is in the hymnal. Things like that. So that was just one problem we faced. And I could have picked 10 different ones, but that was just one that we faced a long time ago. We have not had a children's choir in 10 years. Kids do sing at our church. Our kids do know some music, and it's beautiful. But the real risk you face is this nostalgia, this like deep, deep nostalgia like lives right here. And you're like, well, I remember when the children's choir had 50 kids, and it was like the whole reason my kid ever even wanted to go to church was because the children's choir, and they used to sound so good, and it built the faith of the whole community. Nostalgia can be problematic because they also don't remember all the downsides in nostalgia. You don't remember all the problems. And it's also like not the society we're living in today. Like, we need to take seriously where we're living and the culture we're living in right now. So just because it was blank in the year blank doesn't mean it will ever be that way again. And that's a hard one to combat with church members and churches. It's just because church is often filled with good nostalgia. Um, the other thing is I have people ask me this all the time, like, what if we just, or couldn't we just, or remember when that worked? We have to remember there is no silver bullet. There is no, if only we do this, then it'll be better or fixed or as we remembered. Um, the phrase I say often is, we're never going to good idea our way out of this issue. We're never going to good our way out of the fact that like Christianity is shrinking in the United States. Less people are engaged in church. And it doesn't seem to be a priority of younger generations. That may sound like sad, bad news. Pause, let those feelings feel them. But it's also not something that we particularly can hold and change. And we believe in Jesus Christ and the changing power of God to be with us wherever we are. So all of that to say, There's a lot going on. Um, so I think one thing that's really important in this where we are in 2024 and beyond is that we need to be really intentional, attentive listeners and observers. We need to not only listen to what people say they want, we also need to watch like where their feet are and see like where they show up and when they don't. And that is all data. Like a survey is great. Like I love when people tell me they want all this stuff in a survey, but the reality is like I also am an observer and see like that also speaks and that is also data. So like together those two data points need to match to come up with what's going on. And I think we stand in our truest values. And I think that's really important. Um, like we have values that we want to pass on the faith. We want to grow the faith of our children and youth and adults. And we want to be in the community, just being good neighbors too. Um, so those are some of our values we stand on, but we can also listen, watch patterns, see what people really want. Like nothing has to be the way it is yesterday has to be today. Just because we had a church nursery the last 20 years doesn't mean we need a church nursery the next 20 years. I said it. I mean, do what you want with that. So I wanted to share a couple of things. So these are the thoughts of Brittany Porch as that have just come out of this is take it or leave it. This is just my brain at work. So here's a couple of ways I think I've found a way to discover new ways of being church. And these are just hands-on practical things. So I had last year I had a second grader, my child, and he wanted a book club. He's like, "You have a book club? I want a book club." Well, as a parent, you're like, "Yes, I would love for you to love reading. Let's figure out how we can make this happen." So I went to the school, said I want to do a book club for 10 kids max because you and I, we know we teach. Like that seemed like enough to do one Friday afternoon a month. Don't work Fridays. Once a month felt like enough for me. That felt like enough for the kids to read a book. And we put some values based on it. Like we wanted our book club to have a focus on anti-racism. So we read books of varying people of color. We read varying types. We always read the first in a series because if you really liked it, then you could keep reading. But what I think is so important is that I started going to these book clubs and I was leading them and I started to realize this feels like a whole lot like church. And what it offered me that church sometimes doesn't offer me is it was the same exact 10 kids every week. That they were in a space they felt comfortable, the school library. They were with peers and friends, and so relationships were there. And I was able to be in kids' lives. And these kids came from a variety of different backgrounds and needs. Some of them we have continued. We're now like over a year in, we're in the third grade book club. I mean, some of them still have never read the book. And I kind of giggle that like I can't wait till they're in middle school and say, like, my favorite activity in elementary school was book club, but I'm not sure I ever read the book. There was just a lot of pieces. There are a lot of pieces of book club, and I'm going to walk with this book club at least through fifth grade that feel like church. They feel like good children's ministry. And so I got to thinking, if you look around your building and you're like, wow, we really have very few children and we want to minister to children. Is there a school nearby that you might lead a book club? And if not a book club, a Lego club. If not a Lego club, could you do a monthly service club at the school? Like if we don't have children in our buildings on Sundays or that many, like could we get children in other ways? And that to me like started making me wonder, like could ministry look a whole lot different if we imagine the kids at the school a mile away as our kids? And not that we're there to teach them about Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, but we're there to be caring adults in their lives, present, giving them the things they need. And I mean, I found it super easy. Like maybe because I was a parent, but like it was very easy to begin this and get into the schools and offer these awesome programs. So that was one of my like, I wonder, get curious, because it really just felt like church. Um, Another thing is we always do in the spring some big youth event. We've done lock-ins, we've done late nights, we've done professional sporting events together, all these things. So I gathered all the youth up and I was like, what do you want to do this spring? And they were like, and we were talking through different ideas. And then when push came to shove and we're looking at calendars, one of our beloved youth was like, oh, I can't make it, I'm in the spring musical. Never's been in a musical in his whole life, but tried out, got in as a freshman, and was in the spring musical at his school, as it was Sound of Music, and he was playing Rolf. um so I was like, bummer. And he's like, I wish you guys could go. And many of the youth were like, I wish we could go. And I was like, well, what if we did go? Like, what if that was our event? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds great. So in that sense, I let the youth kind of take leadership, make decisions. We adapted, we were flexible, we were creative, we were curious, like how could we do something with everybody's participation. Then we go to the musical and we have this awesome after discussion about World War II and Nazi Germany and like arts, and can you play a Nazi on stage, and what is it like, and what if you live in a primarily Jewish community? I mean, it just ended up being such good church, such good youth ministry, when it was so never my plan and never would have dawned on me in a million years. So is it youth leadership, youth decision making? Is it staying on your toes and being open minded to where the spirit is flowing? And then the last thing I want to mention, just another random thing that I did in Brittany's world, was in the pandemic. Okay, I'm actually rewind. This church has a long history of Christmas pageants, and it has it's a big thing. Like the pageant had become huge. Um, there were lots of beautiful reasons why the pageant was awesome, and there were also really hard parts of the pageant too, as you can imagine. Um, and we were always trying to remake it, reshape it, like make it about our deepest values: inclusion, welcome, not stressful, fun, like meaningful, learning the stories. And so like we had been adapting it for years. And then the pandemic hits and offers us this beautiful gift where I come up with a pageant script, send everyone their part to record themselves at home, and then have somebody who's better at editing skills put all the videos together. And then all of a sudden we had this movie pageant. Well, what we realized, but what we had to do, was that we went from like 14, 15 kids participating in an in-person pageant to like 40, 50 kids participating in an online pageant, grandparents, my niece who lives in New Jersey. I mean, kids anywhere can really participate. So we all of a sudden started having kids from our church community plus our extended church community, all participating. And then after we thought it was safe again, a couple of years after 2020, we realized, like, what if we showed the movie premiere? So now we don't have a live Christmas pageant still, but we have this movie premiere of the pageant where we all get popcorn and stay right after worship and watch this 10-minute show. And it just gets us in the mood. But again, like we wouldn't have gotten there without creativity, flexibility, generosity, curiosity. And those are just a few examples from my life where I think the church can discover new ways of being the church. So I want to take a pause right here for you to introspect and like think about, journal, write down, wonder about for yourself, or if you're in a group of people to have a conversation together, to talk about what have you done lately that just felt right, felt like ministry, felt like church, but wasn't the church or ministry. Is there something you've done lately where like, maybe it's like a yoga class or a CrossFit class, or maybe it's a hike you did with a long time ago college roommate. But like, what have you done, and what about it made it feel like ministry or church? All right, pause. All right. Hopefully, you had fruitful conversations or thoughts about that. I actually want to know what you said there. So, when we do our live Zoom for your follow-up conversation and Q&A, I hope you save some of those ideas for me, because your creativity will inspire my creativity. While I love change and I love disrupting all patterns and trying new things and failing, and I'm not afraid of failure because it means I tried something new. Um, I know I'm unique in a lot of that, but while that is true, there are also some sacred cows that like you do not touch. And you need to know what those are for your church and for our church. This is our church. It is Christmas Eve. Do not touch anything to do with Christmas Eve. We sing the same welcoming choral piece. We like our same or similar hymns that we rotate maybe through a little bit. We have candles, we have Christmas trees, we have lights, and we all take our family photos in front of the same tree. It feels good, and some things are just, we need some things to not change. Some things that don't change comfort us, connect us to the generations ahead or behind and coming. Some things are just meant to not ever be messed with. So you also need to know those, and all of this too is you need to know your sacred cows, as you continue to think about and discover what the church can be in 2024 and beyond. The last piece of this webinar that we're going to go over is based on a question with the planning team of this event. Is that this kind of kept coming up, and I want to just address it, whether it fits the theme or not. I do think it does fit in, but where did all my volunteers go? Like, how do I get more volunteers? Give me the practical advice. Leave me something to put my teeth on. And while I wish I had the answer to all of this, I think I have some ways for us to move forward. But I don't have all the answers to all of this. But I want you to know, first of all, you're not alone. That there are many civic organizations. This is like from statistical data, that are facing the exact same volunteer shortage that the church is. Parent teacher associations, the infamous PTA, like schools are having trouble getting parents to do all the things that parents used to do. And our public school system was built on parents doing things. I've heard from church members they can't get volunteers at the Kiwanis or the League of Women Voters or the so-and-so's like civic club, like, you know, all sorts of things. A volunteer shortage, less volunteers is a common pattern. It's a common pattern in churches. It's a common pattern in synagogues. It's out there. So what do we do when we have less volunteers? I would suggest we do less. If we have less people to do it with, we can't keep up the stamina. We need breaks. We need to right size things. And I think that's all okay. So I know that's really hard. It's easier said than done, but that's the reality is when we have less people to do things, we have to do a little less. So I want to kind of close this time with introducing you to somebody else. So I went to a webinar put on by the Yale Youth Ministry Institute with the author of this book, Dr. Amy Adamczyk. She is a trained sociologist of religion. She's a professor at City University of New York, otherwise known as the CUNY system, and did a ton of research and data collecting and then sifting through all the data to write this book, Handing Down the Faith. There are lots of interesting parts of this. In fact, that webinar is like out there and free, like might be interesting to you. I can't do all of it here right now with you all. But I do want to like pull out the two things that I think are relevant to this conversation. Is that a big piece of just sort of general, not like fundamental religious people, but like just religious people. One of the big trends that they're seeing is that they are more parents today are more comfortable passing on moderate levels of religious commitment. They aren't looking to pass on deep levels of religious commitment or religious light, but just like they just want their kids to like have a little church stuff. Like, yeah, be like, know the church, be part of the church, but don't overbake in the church. Like, and I don't know if you're seeing this with their bodies or seeing this, but there does seem to be big cultural patterns that parents want a little less from the church. And I want to read two quotes that she presented from her research for you from parents. Um, this is from a Catholic father, and he said that similar to his own upbringing, he was not expecting his children to say a lot of prayers or read scripture. Rather, he wanted simply to show them, this is just how we are. And that was him talking about his experience of passing on his faith. Another mother was kind of doing the opposite. Instead of saying, like, I didn't do much, we're not going to do much. This one was actually a mother rejecting being over churched, over baked, if you will, like I said before, in church. This is also a Catholic mother who said, we've never said to them, you have to believe. I think part of why I rebelled when I did, as far as the church was, that it was seen as you're going to church no matter what. So I think that's just interesting. Like, maybe we need less volunteers because maybe we need to do a little bit less. Maybe they don't need as much. Just throwing it out there. The other thing I thought was interesting from Dr. Adamczyk's work was this osmosis versus intentional influence. Like, most parents saw it like that it was like that there was different ways. You can either intentionally pass on the faith or just like model the faith in the house, the osmosis. So here's a couple quotes related to that. No, she's not coming to church. Laughs. My house, my rules. That's how my mom did it. It was like I was drugged to church. They were drugged too. And then another quote was, growing up, one of my favorite memories was the drive homes from church with the Irish radio program on NPR, which now I do with my kids, which is pretty awesome. The exact same one. And then the critique of the sermon, and then they laughed. And that was by a Catholic father. And then one more was, my father would sit down and read his Bible for hours. So I want to do that for my son. I want him to physically see me doing that. That's the osmosis. Just if I make it this joyful experience, maybe they'll also get it. And versus the other of like, nope, we're doing this. Like, this is what we do. So I think these are the kind of things that parents and culture of parents are wrestling with these days. And I think it's important for us at the church to be observing and listening to this and thinking about it. So I think we can do less. Sunday school could be in 2-week bursts, could be a 5-week series and then 3 weeks off. It could be 30 minutes after church instead of an hour. I mean, I just think the world is endless and you have to know your context and your people. But I do think we're entering this new, since 2020 and on, and probably before, we're entering a time where we might less is maybe okay. You may have heard the trend girl math, where women try to make sense of their math and logic and extreme spending through like silly calculus in their head. Um, if not, definitely look it up. But I would present to you church math. I am convinced that 52 hours of Sunday school a year is less than one half day service project. And I'm not talking about the actual service project. I just made that piece up. What I'm talking about is, I think, shorter bursts of quality time spent together. Maybe it's a half day camp. Maybe it's like we do a 4-day half day camp in our church. And I promise you that is better than any of the content we can do through the year, because we have consistency. We're building off a program. We have the right amount of hours to spend together. And that is much easier to pull off and get attendance from than week after week after week Sunday school. So I just want you to think of that, is sometimes it's like you might be eliminating something to add something else. Maybe you don't have the bandwidth or the volunteer interest or participation interest for that program or ministry, but you do, but maybe there's something that there's a need you could be meeting in the community. I also think worship is enough. Like, know that kids being around worship is also like, and youth, like that is also like the center of our faith lives too. So I hope you take all this as some food for thought. So just to synthesize it all together a little bit, and a quick reminder is stay curious and flexible. Discover new ways by listening and observing patterns of people, and larger cultural patterns that we live within and cannot control. Know your sacred cows and don't touch them. And maybe in less is more in 2024 and beyond. I hope you've enjoyed these Zoom webinars, either in the comfort of your own space or in a group of other people. It's just been my honor to be part of this. And I hope you'll join me on Zoom on Monday, November 19th from 7 to 8 for a Q&A. So if you've had questions along the way or want to ask me more about something particular, and have a dive deeper in our conversation, that'd be great. I don't have a ton planned for that hour. Like, I really hope that we can feed off each other and make that piece the conversational piece. So thanks again. And I look forward to our Q&A. Bye.